Hi, today I was reminded of a particular question I often get asked about whether taking ADHD medications is important during holidays and weekends. We need to take a step back and ask ourselves why you would even ask this question. I think there is a perception that ADHD is merely a school problem and therefore medication is only appropriate to be taken at school. That couldn't be further from the truth. Chatting to a few of my patients today, we had discussions and there were such clear advantages of taking the medication right throughout the school term as well as during holidays. And we are gearing ourselves up to go back to school, and therefore we need to have a discussion and think about why you would take medication when you're not at school. So first of all, I think one needs to understand what is ADHD. ADHD is not a school problem. It is a life problem. And just like you wouldn't stop taking your diabetic medication or your epilepsy medication at the weekends, you wouldn't consider stopping your medication in the holidays and having the occasional fit or a fit at the weekends. You take it all the time. ADHD is a neurochemical problem that's important for control. What is not really understood is that we understand that on the one hand, you get the spectrum of problems that we all understand. It's the caricature of ADHD, hyperactivity, busyness. On the other extreme, you get the inattentiveness and the daydreaming. And that's in the criteria that everybody knows about. But in the middle, there is the emotional side. It's not included in the rating scales because the DSM-5, the clever people that have kind of categorized this problem, have decided not to include the emotional regulation issues because that would include other conditions like anxiety, depression. So we just want to include ADHD. Although we know that in ADHD, it's also about the control of the emotions. ADHD is a self-control disorder. It's a control of all aspects of your executive functions of your brain. So the question comes in is, should you take it during the holidays? I really do understand there are some children who have very significant side effects. It affects the appetite to such a degree that they unfortunately have to stop medication and only take it at smaller doses when it's really necessary. And some medications interferes with sleeping. There are ways you can get around that, but in some cases you've got to stop it. And then unfortunately, 2 out of 10 children have significant side effects and have to take the minimum medication just to help control their symptoms, and we limit it to when they are at school. But for the vast majority, the medication makes a huge difference. For example, chatting to some parents recently, they were saying that just the emotional control during the holidays, having their child with their siblings at home, that sibling rivalry, they're constantly having to have a go at their kids, don't do this, don't do that. They kind of almost having to mini panel beat their children. And medication just helps that child with their self-control, being able to emotionally connect, listen, focus, have empathy, interact correctly, and they don't need as much discipline, and their parents don't need to panel beat them as much. The rest of the world is a much more pleasant place for them. They're not having all this incoming fire at them all the time. And in some children, it can be quite dangerous. I remember during the first lockdown when there were a group of parents that stopped their medication on their very impulsive children. And these children literally had climbed up to trees trying to reinvent or act like Batman, and had just fallen out of trees with forearm fractures, broken wrists. This can be a real danger. So that impulsive behavior that's not controlled is a must in those children. And sometimes the addictive behavior you see at home with your child that can't get off screens, wanting to constantly be on a PlayStation, not having that control of the emotional, impulsive behavior. Medication can make a big difference for them to see the grander picture and the balance. And another aspect that I've introduced into my practice is that there can be differing doses. So the dose that you would use for the school time and the school term, when you might need a slightly higher dose and a more prolonged dose to cover the whole day, we use a different dose for school days, and then at weekends, when the demand is not quite as great, you might not need the whole day controlled in the same way, including homework periods. We give a shorter dose, and we give a lower dose And the same can apply to holidays. So there are kind of ways to get around that problem and not have that complete high dose and during the holiday period. But ultimately it's a decision for parents. So it's an important thing to think about. Do you think that you kind of are a happier family when your child is on medicine? Remember, this medicine often is not necessarily for life. ADHD is essentially an immaturity. So you've got a child, say, at a certain age, say, for example, age 10, and with an ADHD child, they're acting a little bit behind that age, almost kind of an immature version of that 10-year-old. The medication, what it does to it helps narrow that gap and accelerate that gap so that the child can start to act the age. And when they act the age, they can then have self-control that you would expect for that age. Well, I hope this really helps you understand that, to think about why you would give the medication in the holidays, and now that you're gearing up back to school, to consistently take medicine makes a big difference, especially for children who are having therapy. You want them to be able to efficiently absorb the therapy that they're getting. By not giving them medication and not having that kind of concentration and attention, it really makes a lot of that therapy ineffective, and particularly during the class time. Children really benefit from absorbing 99% of their work while they're sitting in class. And so if we can maximize and optimize their treatment while they're sitting in class, they don't have to redo things after school and redo homework and almost have to relearn some of those kind of experiences that they've had in class. Anyway, so I hope that helps parents make a decision on whether they need to alter their opinion on medication and when they should take it. Cheerio.